on his final night in college, Ronald Reagan made a promise that shaped the rest of his life. A quiet, emotional story about choices, regrets, and the people we leave behind. Thank you for listening and keeping these memories alive. Every life has a night that feels heavier than the rest. A night that whispers of endings and beginnings at the same time. A night you don't realize is shaping you until decades later. For Ronald Reagan, that night came in the spring of 1932, the last night before graduation. The last night he would walk the campus of Eureka College as a student. The last night before the world asked him to become someone else. He never forgot it. And though he rarely spoke of it, carried the memory in a quiet corner of his heart like a folded note he couldn't throw away. It wasn't a loud night. No celebrations. No roaring parties. The Great Depression had taken joy and stretched it thin across the country. And students were trying to pretend the future didn't scare them. Reagan had spent the evening finishing packing as the sun dipped behind the brick buildings. His roommates had drifted off one by one, some to parties, others to last-minute goodbyes. Some to sleep away the nerves of tomorrow, but Reagan couldn't sleep. Something inside him felt unsettled, restless, like a door was closing behind him before he had fully stepped through. Graduation was supposed to be triumphant. For him it felt unfinished. So just before midnight, he threw on his coat and walked outside. The campus was drenched in soft shadows. Street lamps glowed in little circles of amber along the cobblestone paths. The air carried the scent of early spring-cold dirt, budding leaves, and the faint sweetness of flowers trying to bloom despite the chill. Reagan shoved his hands into his pockets and walked with no destination, letting memory guide him through places he knew he would never see the same way again. Past the chapel, where he had given his first public speech. Past the gymnasium, where he'd discovered how much he loved the sound of laughter. Past the library, where he spent more time dreaming than studying. Each place felt like a snapshot from a life he wasn't ready to let go of. "What am I doing?" he whispered to himself. It wasn't a question about tomorrow. It was a question about purpose, direction, identity. The world outside felt too big, too loud, too uncertain. The depression was swallowing opportunities whole. Friends were leaving with nothing but hope in their pockets. His own future was a blank page that frightened him more than he wanted to admit. And somewhere in that quiet, uncertain night, he felt a presence. Someone else was awake. Someone else was walking alone. Someone else, like him, wasn't ready for morning. He heard footsteps behind him, soft but steady. When he turned, he saw her, Clara Hartwell. He hadn't expected to see her. Certainly not at this hour. And certainly not alone. Clara was one of those people whose presence carried a kind of unexpected calm. Smart, steady, humble in the ways that matter. The kind of classmate everyone liked, but no one really knew. She had helped run the library's reading circle, tutored students whose grades were slipping, and volunteered for every charity event, even when she barely had time herself. Reagan had spoken to her before, but never deeply. Never long enough to feel the full weight of who she was. She was holding a small stack of papers close to her chest, her coat buttoned tightly against the breeze. When their eyes met, she offered a gentle smile. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked. Reagan shook his head. Not a chance. Clara stepped closer, joining him under the street lamp. Her breath came in soft white clouds. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" she said, knowing everything's about to change. Reagan exhaled slowly. "I keep thinking I'm supposed to feel ready and you don't," she asked. He laughed under his breath. "Not even close." Clara's smile faded into something more thoughtful. "Maybe we're not meant to be ready," she said. "Maybe we just have to trust that the next step will make sense later." Reagan stared at her, surprised by how much he needed to hear those words. "You sound like someone who's already figured it out," he said. She glanced down at the papers in her hands. "I haven't. Not really." There was a quiet sadness to her voice. A sadness Reagan did not understand yet, but would soon. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you want to walk for a while?" He nodded together. They walked through the sleeping campus, past the pond where students carved their initials into the wooden rail, past the courtyard where Reagan had made his closest friends. past the building where he'd first discovered he could make people laugh. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, anchoring, necessary. As they reached the old stone bridge behind the chapel, Clara stopped. "This is where I come when I need to think," she said softly. Reagan looked around. The moon reflected in the dark water. Tree branches swayed gently above. A pair of fireflies blinked over the grass. It felt like a place built for last chances. "What's on your mind?" Reagan asked. Clara didn't answer at first. She hugged the papers tighter. "When I was a freshman," she said quietly, "my father lost his job. We almost couldn't afford to keep me here. I worked every job I could find: library assistant, dining hall, tutoring, anything to help." Reagan listened carefully. "Some nights," Clara continued, "I wasn't sure I would make it through. I almost withdrew twice." Reagan's heart tightened. He had never known, but someone encouraged me, she said. "Who?" he asked. "You." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Reagan blinked. "Me," Clara nodded. "You didn't know it, of course. You were talking to a group of students after chapel. I overheard you say, 'We're all just trying to get somewhere worth going. Don't quit before you find out where that is.'" Reagan felt a strange mixture of embarrassment and wonder. "That made you stay?" he asked. Clara smiled softly. "It made me believe I could." And she held out the papers in her hands. "These are letters," she said. "Letters I've written to my younger brothers and sisters for when they're older. I want them to believe in themselves the way I learned to." Reagan took the top letter gently. "Handwritten, careful, filled with hope," Clara continued. "I'm leaving tomorrow. Not just the college, but Illinois. I've accepted a teaching job in another state." Reagan felt something sink inside him. "I didn't know you were leaving," he said quietly. "Most people don't," she replied. "I didn't want a big goodbye. I wanted one. Meaningful conversation. Just one. Before I go," she lifted her eyes to his, "and I hoped it would be with you." Reagan felt the world pause. A soft wind moved through the trees. A single leaf drifted across the bridge. Something unspoken hung in the air between them. "Why me?" he asked finally. Clara's expression deepened into something honest and raw. "Because you don't realize how much you influence people," she said. "You speak and people feel something. Not because you're loud. Not because you're important. Because your voice carries a kind of hope people want to believe in." Reagan swallowed. "No one's ever said that to me." "Then let me be the first," she whispered. The moment stretched, fragile, warm, unforgettable. Then Clara took a shaky breath. "I want to ask you something," she said. "A promise." Reagan's pulse quickened. "What kind of promise?" Clara stepped closer. "Promise me that no matter where you go, no matter who you become, you won't lose the part of you that believes. People can be better tomorrow than they were today." Reagan stared at her, really stared, feeling something inside his chest shift. "That's some promise," he said softly. Clara nodded. "It's the only one I care about." Reagan felt emotion rise in him like a tide. He extended his hand. "I promise." Clara took it, held it, closed her eyes, and in the quiet of that last college night, Reagan made a vow he would never forget. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that before sunrise, something would happen that made keeping that promise far more complicated than he ever imagined. Something that would haunt him for decades, something he never told his children. Reagan didn't sleep that night. After Clara walked away across the bridge, after her silhouette blended into the dark path and disappeared between the old elm trees, he remained there, hands in his pockets, heart shaking with a mixture of hope, confusion, and a strange ache he couldn't name yet. Her words echoed in his mind. "Promise me you won't lose the part of you that believes people can be better tomorrow than they were today." It wasn't just a request. It was a belief she had placed in him, quiet, steady, undeserved. And something inside him wanted deeply to live up to it. He walked the campus until sunrise, replaying every moment with Clara, the softness of her voice, the conviction in her eyes, the way she held those letters as they were pieces of her heart wrapped in paper. When the first rays of morning light touched the dormitory roofs, Reagan finally returned to his room, exhausted yet strangely alive. He didn't know that the day ahead would take everything he felt and twist it in a way he would never fully heal from. Graduation morning was full of nervous laughter, photographs, rushed goodbyes, and the electric feeling of standing on the edge of adulthood. Students were shouting across the quad, hugging friends they might never see again, talking about the great big lives they believed were waiting for them. Reagan searched the crowd for Clara. He told himself it was just to say goodbye, to wish her well, to honor the moment properly, but deep down, he knew he wanted to see her one more time because something unspoken had passed between them the night before, something fragile and rare. He finally spotted her, across the lawn near the administration building. She was standing with a small suitcase and a single envelope in her hand, but something was wrong. Her shoulders were tense. Her eyes were red. Her breath came quickly, as though she had been running or crying, before he could call out. A professor approached her and placed a gentle hand on her arm. Reagan watched as Clara nodded silently. Holding the envelope against her chest, the professor hugged her tightly. Clara shut her eyes. When they parted, she turned and began walking, quickly, purposefully toward the gate at the end of campus. Reagan didn't think. He moved. He slipped through clusters of students, dodging suitcases and camera flashes until he reached the edge of the path. Clara, he called. She stopped, turned slowly, and Reagan felt his heart clench. Her expression was shattered. "Ronnie," she whispered, voice breaking. "I didn't want you to see me like this." Stepped closer. "What happened?" Her eyes filled instantly, brimming with something deeper than sadness. "My father collapsed this morning," she said, barely getting the words out. "They don't think he's going to make it." The world around Reagan fell into silence. The cheers, the laughter, the shouts of celebration. All of it melted into a distant hum. "I have to catch the early bus," Clara continued, wiping her cheeks. "I have to get home." Reagan placed a hand gently on her arm. "Let me come with you." She shook her head. "No," she whispered. "You have your own future starting today. You can't follow me into mine." Reagan swallowed hard. "Clara," she reached into her coat and pulled out the envelope he had seen earlier. "This is for you," she said, pressing it into his hand. "But don't open it now. Not yet." Reagan looked down at the envelope plain, ivory-colored, sealed carefully. "What is it?" he asked. Clara forced a small, trembling smile. "Something to help you keep your promise." And she stepped back, tears streaking down her cheeks. "I don't know what the world will make of you, Ronnie," she whispered. "But I know what I see when I look at you, and I hope you don't lose that, even when life gets hard." He opened his mouth, but she lifted her hand gently, stopping him. "I have to go," she said, and before he could say the words, he suddenly, desperately needed to say, she turned. She walked toward the gate, passed through it, did not look back. Reagan stood there, holding the envelope, holding the weight of something he didn't understand, yet a moment he sensed. He would never get back. He never saw her again. Clara's father passed later that week. Reagan learned this from a mutual friend who had received a letter from Clara's family. She didn't return to campus. She didn't write back to anyone. She disappeared into the quiet corners of the world teaching, helping, living a life far away from the one she had almost shared with them. Reagan kept the envelope for months, unopened, untouched, stored. Carefully inside a book on his nightstand, he told himself. He would open it once he felt ready. Once he understood the promise he had made, once he understood why she had chosen him, of all people. But life moved. Radio opportunities appeared. He entered broadcasting. He moved from town to town. He fell in love. He married. He divorced. He married again, and still the envelope remained unopened. Not because he forgot, but because he was afraid of what opening it might reveal. The truth, he later admitted to himself, was simple. He didn't want to confront the possibility that the person Clara believed he could be was not the person he actually was. It wasn't until years later, after he became governor, after he faced challenges that shook him, after long nights of self-doubt, when he questioned whether he was leading well, that he opened a drawer looking for a pen and saw it again. The envelope. Ivory turning yellow at the edges. His name written in Clara's careful handwriting. His breath caught. Slowly. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. He unfolded it and began to read. Ronnie, I don't know what path life will take you down, but I've watched you long enough to know this. People listen when you speak, because you believe in them more than they believe in themselves. That is a rare gift. Please don't lose it. Reagan felt his throat tighten. He kept reading. And if life ever makes you doubt yourself, if you ever feel you've failed or fallen short or forgotten who you were, then promise me this. Find someone who needs encouragement and give them what you gave me, even if it's only with a few simple words. You changed my life without knowing it. Someday, you will do the same for others. I know this as surely as I know my own name. Reagan pressed a hand to his mouth. The final lines broke him open. I don't know why our paths crossed the way. They did. I only know that I'm grateful. If we never meet again, I hope you become the man I saw in you last night. That is my only wish, Clara. Reagan folded the letter slowly, reverently. He sat for a long time, still. Changed. Then something inside him settled. Not peace. Not closure. But purpose. He placed the letter in a safe place, not to forget it, but to carry it. And from that day forward, whenever doubt crept in, whenever criticism cut deep, whenever the world demanded more of him than he felt he could give, he remembered Clara. He remembered the bridge, the promise, the belief she had placed in him on his last night of college, a belief he tried imperfectly, quietly, faithfully to honor for the rest of his life. He never told his children about her, not because he was hiding anything, but because some memories are not secrets, they are foundations. And foundations don't need explanations. They simply need to hold. If this story touched your heart, your support keeps these quiet memories alive. A like, comment, or subscription means more than you know. Thank you for listening.